also, with more light comes bigger bills. Well, that's what the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission has explained. We've noticed that there's been a recent increase in electricity bills by power distribution companies, and the regulatory body says it is as a result of stability in the power supply in the past 3 months. Now, despite the improvement, electricity tariffs have not changed, and that's according to the Commission. And so customers who paid bills that were calculated based on illegal rates should contact the Commission. Olabode Shomi, CEO, Captree Limited, and editor-at-large, Energia Today, joins me to talk about some of these issues. Good morning, Olabode. Thanks for coming through.
Good morning, and thanks.
Well, let's start with, one of the top stories, federal government entering a partnership with TE Connectivity. At this time, it is a very welcome development, especially since we know as much as possible there's a lot of plans to develop local talent. But is this coming too late?
Well, not necessarily. It's never a bad time to do the right thing. So the fact that the government is taking proactive steps to ensure that the industry is improved is a welcome development. But having said that, the challenges in the industry are a lot more fundamental than partnerships can solve. The industry has been privatized, and we need to know that we are the first country in Africa to actually privatize its power sector. So there isn't exactly role models, so to speak. But importantly, it is important to note that the industry is, by the view of the industry players, is not properly commercialized. In simple terms, it means that some key aspects of the industry players do not have sufficient, they are not making profit, in simple terms. The discos, in their own words, they are running at a loss. None of them has turned a profit since they've commenced operation. And it is the money that actually comes in from the discos that pays the gencos, and also is used for the transmission company. And then when you look at the transmission company of Nigeria, which is being managed by Minitoba, there are significant internal issues there between the market operator, the systems operator, NIBET, which has some affiliation with NERC, and as well as the Minitoba staff themselves. Then there is the issue of NERC itself. As of today, NERC, we're expecting the tenure for the management to go out by the end of the year. They are not expected to come back. So in simple terms, we have a lame duck management that is there. So the industry as a whole seems to need some kind of amount of strength to push it forward. Yes, there is activities, there are things in the news and all that, but it's not something that is long-term and sufficient to give it the kind of momentum and strength that it deserves.
Looking at the strength and momentum that it deserves, what strategies can be put in place in the immediate term? Because you just pointed out that the management of NEC should be ending its tenure by the end of this year. So what quick strategies can be put in place to ensure that the regulatory aspect of this critical sector doesn't suffer?
Well, it would be unfair to say that the regulatory aspect of the industry is suffering. But what we have at the moment is that we have people who want to invest, we have people who want to make decisions, critical decisions, who are delaying it because they expect that whatever activities are engaged with the current management of NERC may not be relevant in a few months' time. And that makes some sense. What is needed is that there needs to be some movement within government to indicate that this is the direction of government, especially within NERC. Within the people that will come in. If the tenure of the current management will be renewed, that movement and that indication needs to be given, because that will give confidence to the sector. But that is just an aside of it. As to the fundamentals, the industry is one that is moving from government-centered ownership to private sector ownership. Now, the mentality, the activities, the direction, the very ethos of private sector is very different from government. So there are people who have not been able to make the transition from government to private sector. For those who have made the transition from government to private sector, the thinking has not necessarily changed. So you have a disconnect between the expectations of the private sector-led discourse and the staff that they have inherited. Well, that has now resulted in them employing other people who are maybe younger, who are maybe more dynamic. But the experience now lies with those who are older, who are with the government. So you now have people who may be younger, who may be paid better, but who now have lack certain competence. So it throws in a new ball game, the issue about training and about competence in the industry. The older people who have the experience may not necessarily be the right target for the new players in the industry. A number of countries who have investment in the sector have identified this. In fact, there's one of the Western nations, I believe is the French embassy, who is willing to partner with companies who are involved in training in that area, and they're willing to invest significant funds in that direction. So that is another area that needs to be looked into. There is a very, very strong need there. But more importantly, in terms of the basics itself, is when you look at the power sector, and they're talking about metering and all that, we have close to 40 to 50% of consumers who are not metered. In other words, they do guess estimation simply because the meters are not available, the meters are not working. So there is a need for meters to be available, and there's a need for those meters to be installed properly, so that the actual revenues that comes in, that these companies should get, they should get it. And then there's the issue of the genuine cost of the power. It takes an amount of money to produce power, and there is no business in which you are going to sell less than what you produce. So we need to look at the commercialization of the power sector as a whole and see what is really genuine and what is really prosperous, because it is then that the industry can be self-sustaining, and it is then we can say that we have a functional industry.
We're talking a little bit more about the commercialization. Of course, in most of the major dailies today, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission says that stable power supply is responsible for what we've seen in terms of higher bills. A lot of complaints have been coming in with regards to that, and some people feel that somehow the new tariffs have kicked off. But looking at the commercialization, as you really pointed out, this isn't such a bad thing, is it, for us to be having bills coming in commensurate with the kind of electricity that we consume?
We need to be fair, not just to the system, but to ourselves when we make some complaints. Because I've heard some things from Nigerians, and they are nothing but simple mischief. The fact of the matter is that when you consume more electricity, you are going to pay more bills. It's as simple. It's logical. But people complain, not because they don't know that their current rates are proper, but simply because they are paying more. So you have a situation in which it's private sector led, it's a private sector initiative, but people still want it free. The ethos, what is really at the background of a lot of people who speak, who make unfounded complaints, who make accusations, who point fingers, is the fact that they want the service, but they want it at no cost. But the issue is that nothing is really free. Somebody is going to pay for it. If the people don't pay for it, then government needs to pay for it. And we know with the weight of things that we are not expecting government to do everything, even though they must do a lot of things. But the fact is that people must actually know what they are supposed to pay and pay properly. And that is another role for regulation, because there is an education of the populace, there's an education of the people, there's an education of people who are sensitive to industrial and national development. Once people have a very strong and fair idea of what the cost of production is, when they have a very fair idea of what the cost of transmission is, and the administrative costs that will entail distribution, then they can have an idea of what they consume. Once people are sure that they are consuming what is fair, then you will have some part of the society who will act as champions, who will act as a protagonist to champion the very cost of the power sector, which they seem to be doing themselves, which is a burden on itself. They must understand that even though the consumers are the ultimate beneficiaries, the consumers technically are stakeholders in the system, and the consumers must be educated. There must be nationwide campaigns, there must be initiatives, there must be, a lot of things needs to be done in terms of educating the populace. And I think that is a fundamental thing that the new management in NERC must be looking forward to.
Olabode, thank you so much for your time. Do have a profitable day and enjoy your weekend.
Thank you very much.
Olabode Showmi is the CEO, Captree, and editor-at-large, Energia Today, giving us his perspectives on latest developments, especially with regards to electricity. Now, Business Morning continues after this. Join me again.